Test 9, Closing Risk Management, Property Management. The conditions of escrow agreement cannot be met and the related transaction cannot be completed. In such a case, the escrow agent returns funds to the buyer. To avoid violating the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, parties who are providing services to the borrower or seller in a transaction must disclose in writing any business relationships they have with other parties involved in the transaction. A certain item is to be presented between a buyer and a seller. If no outside party is concerned, which of the following statements is true? The item must be prorated and recorded as debt to one party and a credit to the other party for the same amount. An item is said to be paid in arrears if it is normally paid at some time after the expense is incurred. A seller received a rental payment of $900 in advance. At closing, the seller has earned $320 of the rent. What would appear on the closing statement? A debit to the seller and the creditor to pay the buyer for $580. A buyer will receive a water bill for an estimated $100 at the end of the month. At closing, the seller has issued an estimated $43 in water bill. What should appear on the closing statement? A debit to the seller and credit to the buyer for $43. A sale transaction closes on April 1st, the 91st day of the tax year. The day of closing belongs to the seller. Real estate taxes for the year not billed yet are expected to be $2,190. According to the 365-day method, what is the seller's share of the tax bill? $546. A sale transaction closes on July 4th. The day of closing belongs to the seller. On January 1st, the seller paid a hazard insurance premium of $375 for the calendar year. According to the 12-month, 30-day method, what is the seller's share of the insurance premium? $191.67. Waldo is buying Mary Ann's home. The closing date, the day belongs to the seller. Of the sale transaction is September 1st, day 244 of the year. Current year real estate taxes are $1,100, which will be billed to buyer for the next year. Use the 365-day method for prorating. What is Mary Ann's share of the real estate taxes? $735.34. Christine is buying John's house. The closing date belongs to the seller. Of the sale transaction is September 1st, day 244 of the year. Existing hazard insurance of $350 has been paid by John through December 31st. Use the 365-day method for prorating. What is Christine's share of the existing hazard insurance already paid in full? $116.03. A sale contract stipulates that a buyer is to pay the seller's transfer tax expenses. This practice is not customary in the area. In this case, the buyer must pay the expense. What a buyer has to pay at closing is equal to the excess of the buyer's debits over the buyer's credits. The standard E&O policy covers damage resulting from negligence, error, or omissions in carrying out professional services. Which of the following is a common risk relating to the agency relationship? Failing to inform and disclose properly. Even after giving buyer and seller the required information about the property condition disclosures, the license may still be subject to legal action for failing to disclose, known as adverse facts. A license performing a comparative market analysis must be careful to avoid creating a false impression that the licensee is a certified appraiser. One of the major risk areas in fulfilling a listing agreement is exceeding the authority of the agreement. To reduce the risk of committing an error or omissions in the contract process, it is a good idea to use a checklist of all items, contingencies, dates, and responsibilities that must be met. Regarding contracts and forms, the principals may make changes as long as they sign or initial each change. Fair housing laws are easily violated. An effective way for an agent to minimize the risk of doing so is to obtain education in the content and the intent of the laws. A licensee risks violating antitrust laws by being present at a conversation where the setting of commission rate is disclosed. A licensee risks violating antitrust laws by being present at a conversation where setting of commission rates is discussed. How is an intentional misrepresentation penalized? A licensed discipline, fines, and possible incarceration. Of the following actions, the only one which avoids any risk of committing unintentional misrepresentation is stating that a client should seek legal counsel. To reduce risks inherent of reporting transaction progress to a client, the licensee should avoid speculative statements in all reports. How does sharing the qualifying function with the lender protect a licensee? It reduces the chance of presenting an offer from an unqualified buyer. The area of agent activity where there is great risk of failing to maintain client confidentiality is the agency relationship. The area of agent activity where there is the greatest risk of creating a false impression that the licensee is certified appraiser is performing a comparative market analysis. One of the major risk areas in advertising a listed property is that the advertisement will make a substantial misrepresentation. Property managers have a blank relationship with the property owner. Fiduciary. One of the property manager's fundamental responsibilities is financial reporting to the principal. Effective gross income is defined as revenue from all sources minus losses from uncollected rents, vacancies, and evictions. The efficiency of marketing activities can be measured in terms of cost per tenant, prospect generated per lease. If a property's vacancy rate is significantly lower than the market rates, it may be a sign that the manager needs to raise rental rates. What are the three kinds of maintenance a manager has to carry out for managed property? Routine, preventative, and corrective. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires property managers to ensure that disabled employees have the same level of access to facilities that all employees have. Commercial fire and hazard insurance policies usually require coverage to equal at least 80% of the property's replacement value. Trust funds to be handled by a property manager are likely to include all of the following except cash for the management firm's operating expenses. What kind of agency is commonly created by a management agreement? General. Which of the following describes a gross lease? The tenant pays fixed rent and the landlord pays all the operating expenses. If an apartment contains a refrigerator that is not included in the lease, the property manager does not have to maintain it. A basic responsibility of the landlord is to deliver a habitable property. How does construction eviction occur? A tenant declares a landlord in default and vacates the lease premises. Among the essential elements of management plan is a consideration of the competitive market for the property. Among the essential elements of a management plan is consideration of the competitive market for the property. And that's the final question on the Maryland Section 9 Real Estate License Exam Prep for Risk Management and Property Management.